Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Expression of Illness, a conversation with the filmmakers. We're so glad you're here for this powerful discussion about how creative expression and storytelling can help navigate the experience of illness. Today, you'll hear from Bryn Silverman, a thyroid cancer survivor and the director of Expression of Illness, along with the film's producer, Naveen Chaubal. They'll share clips from their documentary and reflect on the ways art and narrative can help process emotions, foster connections, and create meaning in the face of illness. We know that navigating illness, whether personally or as a caregiver, can feel isolating and overwhelming. Bryn and Naveen's work shows how storytelling can build bridges and give voice to those experiences in a way that resonates deeply. Throughout the webinar, we invite you to share your questions and comments in the chat. We'll set aside time at the end for a live Q&A, giving you the chance to ask Bryn and Naveen about their film, their creative process, and the themes it explores. Before we get started, we want to shine a light on some of our meaningful work. If today's conversation resonates with you, please be sure to check out our 30 Stories campaign. All month long, we have been sharing real experiences from survivors and caregivers. You can find these incredible stories on the THANC Guide, our YouTube channel, and across social media. And if you're looking for a trusted resource that supports thyroid, head, and neck cancer survivors, visit the THANC Guide, a comprehensive site designed for newly diagnosed patients, survivors, and caregivers. You'll find reliable information, helpful tools, and inspiration to guide you through every step of the cancer journey. Let's meet our panelists. Bryn and Naveen, would you guys introduce yourselves?
Yeah, thank you, Genevieve. Thank you so much to Thank Foundation for having us. It's really an honor to be here and speak with you all today and talk about our film. I'm Bryn Silverman. I'm a documentary filmmaker and a thyroid cancer survivor, as Genevieve mentioned. And I started working on this project actually 2 years after I was diagnosed and treated for thyroid cancer. And it was sort of born from a personal autobiographical series that I would do every year. And then when this happened, it sort of was a creative and logistical life shift for me. And that was sort of the inspiration to turn the camera on myself and my experience. And I've worked on projects that have been on Netflix and Hulu, and this is definitely a different beast and something that's so personal and new for me to be this intimately involved in a project. And Naveen Chaubal is my producing partner, is also the director of photography on the film, the DP, and also my partner in real life and in the film, which you'll see. And so maybe I'll pass it to Naveen to give a little intro as well.
Hi everyone, Naveen here. Yeah, thanks to Thank for having us. I think, as Bryn mentioned, we're filmmakers who went through this uh, incredible, confusing, interesting, heartfelt, scary time together and used the medium that we know to kind of process through everything. And, Bryn was going through it in her body and as the person who's most affected by it. But as a caregiver, I kind of learned how to step into this role and figure out what my role is as a filmmaker as well. So, yeah, looking forward to the conversation today.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for being here. Can you just tell us a little bit about why you decided to create this particular documentary?
Yeah, this film. So I suppose it started with I started to film and record audio of my doctor's appointments to just remember the information that I was being flooded with. So it kind of started as this tool for me to have in appointments, along with, Naveen is my caregiver there beside me as well to help. But it was like a filtering tool. And I think as a documentary filmmaker, it really helped me kind of process the information because in the moment it was just so overwhelming that I couldn't intake as much as I knew that I needed to or that I would have wanted to later after the fact. And it was when I started doing that, it kind of developed this relationship with my doctors and with the thyroid cancer care community, where I started to kind of uncover some gray area in my treatment. And I had papillary carcinoma, and I fell sort of in like low intermediate risk for recurrence on the scale. And this is where I started to kind of do some research into some of the questions that my doctors couldn't answer. And so what began as sort of this tool to just like relay information or to clock information for myself later became a little bit of like an investigative journalistic journey of like, why are there not answers to some of these questions that I have, and where can I find those answers? And that led me to connect with some of the top thyroid cancer endocrinologists, doctors in the world, and go to the American Thyroid Association conferences and kind of embed a little bit in the community. And it became this experience of my positionality as a documentary filmmaker, and also the hat that I wore as a patient, was this really like unique combination to be able to have access to some information that I don't think a lot of patients had access to. And then this film, then that sort of spurred and inspired the continuation of making it. So it's like, if this can be a tool for other patients, you know, coming out of this, maybe not with concrete answers, but just like the way to navigate some of the unknown, because that's for me what ultimately was the case. Is like, there are still not answers to a lot of the questions that I have, but I know better now how to navigate it for myself on an emotional level and in community, and have a better understanding of what resources are out there for patients like me. So that was sort of, I think, some of the impetus to finish the project. And we worked on it for, whew, Naveen, we filmed what, probably for about 2 years, and then I think I was editing for about a year.
Wonderful. And it really is incredibly powerful, this video. And I hope people can, as we just watch the clips that you've chosen for us, I hope people can really experience um, the impact that it can have. Naveen, is there anything you want to add about, why you thought it was important to do this? Or maybe you were a little anxious about doing it. I don't know. I don't want to make assumptions.
No, that's a great question because it's definitely the latter. I think I was anxious at first to bring in the element of a camera in and film it. For me, it was also just a lot of information at every appointment to remember and try and go through. So I think Bryn really was able to take the lead to kind of guide the way, and in a way like kind of show me that the caregiver is a role in this whole process, and there are responsibilities in it, and taking on those responsibilities is kind of a new identity for me as well. So I think it was yeah, really important to kind of embrace this kind of new role for me, and understand that I had an important part to play beyond just being a partner, you know.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important to sort of bring to the forefront of the cancer experience, is the people that stand behind and beside the patient, and the role that they play as well. And with that, I would love to know who's in our audience. So we're about to post a poll, and tell us what best describes you. Are you a cancer survivor, a caregiver, someone close to you has had or has cancer, or are you a medical professional? We'll give you a few minutes to mark your poll and let us know who you are that's in the room with us today. Wow, so we have a lot of people who have had somebody who has had cancer. That shouldn't be surprising, right? And yet it always is, to me, surprising. And we have got a few cancer survivors and a couple of caregivers and a good amount of medical professionals, which I think is really important also, that they are here to hear what the experience is like from the perspective of both the person on getting treatment and the caregiver as well. So let's get started. Bryn and Naveen, thank you again so much for joining us. Naveen, I actually want to start with you. And I'd like to know what you were experiencing when you heard that there was an additional tumor that had been removed that that we weren't anticipating. That was new news for both of you. And I'd love to hear from you a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think it was definitely scary at first to know what that means. And as you can see, there's a lot of information, and that clip is a short version of a conversation that was, over an hour long. So for me, it was definitely just difficult to hear all the information at once and like understanding there was additional foci was scary at first, but is almost like lost in all this information that was going on. Yeah.
And Bryn, what was that like for you? And what's it like to watch it back
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. It's so interesting to watch it back because I think what that appointment did beyond scaring me quite a bit was it kind of armed me with new information, which I think was my biggest takeaway from a lot of my appointments was that I sort of had to shelve the emotional experience and maybe disassociate a little bit to be able to take in all of the information that I needed in any given moment. And so it's changed the vocabulary that I use to talk about my experience, honestly, because now when I talk about, my cancer, I can say that I had 3 foci and that I know that before. Of course, it was 2, but it does change things a little bit to know that it was 3. And it also kind of plants a seed of doubt that it's like, why didn't I know that before? And why wasn't that explained to me before? And then should I get like a fourth opinion? As there was you just like it seeds this sort of doubt that every stone is being unturned and about like the thoroughness of the practitioners at every step of the way. And I think that is a really scary thing to experience, but I think also like in terms of the doctor-patient relationship can create this sort of schism that is really unhealthy and counter to the healing experience. And I think it's pretty common. And there's just a lot of just seems like, some things that may be important to the patient slip because it's not necessarily the most alarming or urgent on the clinical side. But then for the patient, it would be really urgent and, essential to know and have the full picture of what's going on. And that was certainly my experience, and something that I wanted to know. And I think in a lot of this, it was just like understanding my identity as a patient. And in each doctor's appointment, I think I understood that more and more. It was almost like the entire experience of making this film and of going through cancer treatment was sort of an experiment in knowing like who am I in this space, and I will be in this space now for the rest of my life as a with chronic illness now. And so um how am I bringing my own biases, preferences into that space? How can I communicate that to the practitioner so that there's more of an ease in the conversation, or that a little, can help sort of balance out maybe some of the power dynamics that are, I think, inherently at play in those situations. So I think in that moment, yeah, I sort of I maybe had my filmmaker hat on, and was just sort of like, we need this information and I need to understand better what's going on. And then it was really like when I would go home that I was able to kind of feel and experience. And that's where Naveen's role as the caregiver was this sort of twofold. I was really clear with him, like, I want to capture, I need, we call it good coverage. We need coverage of this scene. It was
Mhm.
almost easier for me to talk about it that way and use my art form as like a shield, and then we'd go home and the emotional experience would sort of flood me and us, and we would sort of download in a different space.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really interesting to be in those kinds of to have the ability to be in 2 different places, and it makes me think about the cancer experience and how people really are. Um, you have to be your patient, but you also have to sort of be in this place where I'm like on this receiving end of information and taking this, so like almost like a learner, right? Um,
Yeah.
and then go home and process everything that you've heard in a different space and in a different way. I think that is um, really fascinating to kind of think about the ways in which that we have to kind of separate ourselves from the
Yeah.
experience. Um, I want to make sure that people are taking the opportunity to ask questions and put them in the chat or in the Q&A, so that we can hear from you all and hear what you're thinking about as you watch each of these clips. Um, I want to move on to our to our next clip.
Actually, Genevieve, if I could just mention real quick,
Yeah.
just thinking about what you were just saying as well, in terms of like the different hats and compartmentalizing, it does feel like there's like a world in the clinical space and a world outside, and this film felt like a way to merge the two, and then it became this sort of tool as well, and something that I encourage other patients as well to kind of lean into is like the collection of the information. Because another thing that I didn't realize that I learned also in that appointment, which is not in the scene, was about the genetic testing for my cancer. And I didn't know at the time that I had even had genetic testing. And so when the results came back to me, it was never fully explained. And that's what then changed my prognosis to be a little bit higher on the intermediate scale, which is, in terms of decision making, it's like having all of those pieces to the puzzle was pretty essential. And that also then, I think, continued to inspire the journey of searching for, okay, wait, does this mean I need to do radioactive iodine or not? Because that sort of raised the stakes of whether or not I would have a recurrence and how potentially dangerous that could be down the line. So that was just
Mm.
something I thought, yeah, I'd mention as well.
I think so much of what I'm, in our conversations for this and having watched the clips and the video and the documentary and really experiencing the two of you, it's really helping, I think, me, and I hope others that are watching this now really recognize the ways in which that we have to sort of bring these parts of ourselves together and to use the things that are our strengths to help us navigate these very challenging experiences. Both of you tapped into yourselves as artists to to process that information and really are it's a making meaning of a situation to be able to then share that in this format with others. And I just think that's really powerful. We've got some questions from our audience. Um, as a patient and a caregiver during the process of treatment, there's very little you can do but endure. Did making the film feel like a way to push back against the trauma? It's a great question.
For me, yes, absolutely. It kind of felt like a way to come back into my own power a little bit more because it was like, the camera is such a powerful tool, and to be in front of the camera is such a vulnerable experience, no matter, I think, who you are and how sort of camera ready you might be. And I think that was the case for myself. I think I'll let Naveen speak for himself. I think it was the same for him, and also for a lot of the practitioners and doctors and researchers, scientists that we talked to, like the vulnerability that they offered us as well felt like healing in a way. Like it felt so healing to meet doctors, to have doctors who not only cared about my well-being and making the right decisions together, but also cared about like the larger picture of what we were trying to do with this film. So for me, I think it really helped to lean into the art form to just, feel like I'm still a documentary filmmaker. It's like I'm a cancer patient, I'm a cancer survivor, and also I'm all these other things. It's like the identity of a cancer patient is so dominating and takes up so much time, so much space, emotionally, physically, logistically, that to do something else that felt like it was in the same space, but in a very different way of engaging with it was for sure very empowering for me.
How about you, Naveen?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. I think like exactly what Bryn's saying, springboarding from there, it felt like it kind of dampened the trauma blow in a way. Like even rewatching this scene, I've worked on many projects with Bryn. I can see her as like an interviewer as well in this scene, not only as a patient, but she's also like interviewing uh, this doctor and getting the answers, getting the questions. So it was such an interesting process to, yeah, even reflecting on that, even now looking at this scene, it's almost like an interview. It feels so
Mhm.
interesting to think about the way we process things. And for us, yeah, using the tools that we had. And even like Brenda was saying, it's so vulnerable to be on camera for us. But then I also wonder about the doctors. Did it hold them accountable to like
Mhm.
really take the time to pause and think about what they were saying, or did it not, or did they not care about the camera being there? So I think that was also a really interesting thing that the camera provided and our art form provided.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I actually was surprised at how many people were so willing to be freely filmed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I agree with you. I think it's a real testament to the recognition of the vulnerability of all the parties involved in this. How do I share this information to somebody in a way that they can hear it? And
Mhm.
how am I hearing this information in a way that I can understand and process it?
Mhm.
And getting a cancer diagnosis is like learning a new language, right? And when there's so much new and confusing language, how did you keep yourself from spiraling or becoming overwhelmed or just shutting down even from it all? And this is for both of you. So who'd ever like to go first?
I mean, I will say there was no way to prevent being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
There was just no way from like the very beginning, even till now. I'll have moments where the anxiety will surface and it's overwhelming all over again. And I think it's been a journey of just like allowing that, just accepting that that's kind of part of it. And knowing that, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm a very sort of direct thinker. I like research. I like to investigate, get into like the meat of something, and that helps me. It's like knowing the research, reading, the medical journals that I do not understand. It helps me because it makes me feel like I'm taking steps towards understanding like the full picture of the thing. And so for me, that was really helpful. And I don't think that's true for everyone. It's like I think we're all so different. And this goes back to the identity piece as well. It's like what works for me isn't going to work for everyone. But I do think that there were certain things about the treatment that were so hard that I just don't think should be hard. Like finding parking, knowing where the doctor's office is, the paperwork, some of the communication. It's like those things can be fixed. And I'm making it my mission to do what I can to try to, fix some of the things that should not be so difficult for a newly diagnosed patient. Um, but yeah, the overwhelm, I think, was just, it was just part of it. What do you think,
Yeah,
Naveen?
yeah, definitely. And shutting down was such a part of it. I think, even for me personally, like there were moments where, like you were saying, like hearing some of the news of how intense the diagnosis is or what the next steps are, and then shutting down as a filmmaker or shutting down as a partner, forgetting to watch the battery level of cameras and making sure things are like prepared for the shoot, even though we're trying to just prepare to go to the appointment, putting on like all these different hats. Definitely ran into all those issues throughout the whole process of making this and Bryn's treatment. Um, and I think it took a long time, I would say, right, Bryn, where like to just being able to embrace that all of that's gonna happen, the shutting down, the spiraling, the not knowing what to do, doing the
Mhm.
wrong thing, and just being able to like find a common moment to like get back to some level of homeostasis, I guess, but embracing it all.
That's a great word for it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's just really powerful. I'm overusing the word for lack of better ones, but just the scene of you wandering around the parking garage to me, and I've shared this with you both, that it just feels so much like what the journey is like, right? I'm supposed to be here, but this is not where but it's not open. It's this, why is this way? When they told me this, then I don't understand this, right? Like everything sort of led to a new kind of realization, and the metaphor of that parking garage to making these decisions.
Every
Um,
time.
yeah, is just really, I just think really poignant about what this journey is like, that there isn't a clear set path, and some of it is, it's all very individual,
Yeah.
and how we both experience it, and what happens for us and to us. Um, there's another part of this clip that I'm really interested in getting your hearing more about, and that is you were really you really focused on the word radioactive.
Mhm.
Um, and language is a way in which that we experience the world and the ways in which that we, there's an emotional as much as an intellectual attachment to words and there was clearly an emotional response, like a full body response to the word radioactive, justifiably so.
Yeah.
Um, did you find a way ever? Did you find a way, or did you ever, or did anyone help you like reframe that language so that it didn't feel so scary?
hmm Yes, I would say there's a conversation in the film with Dr. Julianne Sosa, who's at UC Berkeley, and the way she talks about this is so inspiring to me. It's very, well, it's really individualistic, and like her framing just made me feel calm. I love the conversation with her, and we spend a lot of time on it in the film, because even, words like remission, like I think, in the new medical guidelines just came out for thyroid cancer care, and she was leading the charge. And it used to be that thyroid cancer survivors, we didn't use the word remission, that it wasn't associated with like our type of cancer. And that's different now. And so that, just being able to use that word is like a shortcut in understanding with the outside world, of like what I'm going through, because I think cancer with a capital C has so many connotations, a whole history of, like a PR campaign in so many words for individual, diseases that have come to have their sort of own movements and fundraisers, and I think that sticks in the public consciousness, and so we know so much about some but not others. I think thyroid cancer specifically falls really under the radar in terms of that, um, that kind of outreach and that awareness. And so the word radioactive associated with cancer was just like, whew, I immediately didn't want to do it. Like if I didn't need to do it, I didn't want to do it. But then starting to understand some of the risks that might be associated with not doing it. It's like, can I live with that unknown? And I think ultimately I have decided not to do radioiodine. But there's not a lot of research for folks with my specific prognosis to know like whether in 30 years I will have a recurrence or not. It's just really gray. There's not, the research just isn't there. And so that's something that I've kind of had to come to terms with and find peace within. But I think the words completely informed, and maybe more than anything, the delivery of those words. Because I think there's a way to frame anything so that it allows space for the other person to have their own experience with the information. And I think a lot of the framing, um, for me, was really abrasive. And, because it's just the day-to-day stuff, it's like a lot of the practitioners didn't think that they were giving me news that would totally floor me, because I'm not in, as horrible situation as their other patient. But then for me in my life, it's like completely pulls the rug out from under me. So there's just so much context that I think the medical system doesn't maybe allow for. There's not enough time. There are not enough social resources. And so it puts a lot of pressure, I think, on both the patient and the clinician. Um, and that, I think that's sort of my big takeaway. How about you, Naveen, with the language?
Yeah, I think on both ends, right? It seemed like they were so used to the language, the doctors, the medical professionals are so used to the language, and maybe they know more of the data behind it. Um, but it doesn't dampen the seriousness of it, even though this radioiodine is tested and has been used for generations, it's still radioactivity, and it still does something to your body. And when you take it, you have to sleep in a different bed and sleep in a different room. And they say that's an extra precaution, but it's still a precaution. And so I think like you're right, Bryn, like there's such a growing space that needs to happen around how you talk to patients and even how patients can receive something. And I think that's where, even for me personally, learning, my role in the room was to be able to hear things as well, maybe in a different way than Bryn would, because we are two different people. So having an extra person in the room, whether that is a partner or a friend or other family member, became so important to be able to compare notes in a way, mental notes. So yeah, language was so important.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can imagine some people hearing the word radioactive and thinking, good, it's going to obliterate, right? And then others hearing radioactive and being like, ooh, what's that going to do to the rest of me,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
so there are very much different, and I think the idea of having somebody with you always when you go in for appointments, when you are meeting, and if a doctor will let you record, I think even better. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
just,
we
yeah. Sorry,
yeah, I was gonna say like yeah, we when we in the film we even interviewed a doctor who was diagnosed herself, and
Mhm.
the way she heard the language change when she was giving it, it felt like one thing, and then her opinions changed when she had to receive it, which was
Yeah.
fascinating to hear from her.
Yeah, the words minimalist and maximalist. And I'm forgetting the name of the book, but there was a great book that was recommended to me about that specifically, and not specific to cancer, but just in treatment generally, like this idea of like where we all fall on spectrums of minimalism and maximalism and how that can change based off of like the circumstance that we're in. And that really helped me kind of reframe. But yeah, this doctor that Naveen's talking about, she went from being a minimalist in her recommendations to patients to being a maximalist when it came to her own care. And I think that shift is sort of everything. Like it's just such a personal person to person experience.
and you may not know which one you are until you're in that circumstance and in that
Yeah.
setting.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
maybe there's even something to be said for giving yourself that space to figure that out as you're in that journey, right? As you're processing all this information, to
Mhm.
give yourself the time um, to figure out whether you're a minimalist or a maximalist, right? Or somewhere in between.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thank you guys so much. This has just been just so really just really helpful, I think, to hear from people who have been through it and then had time to create a home documentary on it with us with a perspective um, that is unique and yet at the same time probably very universal to people. Um, Naveen, you really struggle with the duality of your role as a filmmaker and as a partner. Um, were there moments where you just had to put the camera down and be full on partner, or moments where you felt it was so important to capture Bryn's responses that you had to stay in that filmmaker role?
Oh, completely, completely. And I think that first clip that we saw was the perfect example where, because the appointment was so long and so much was covered, I struggled so much of like, should I hold the camera up or do I like lean in and listen? And you know, it's harrowing information to hear. Should I, I'm sitting like across from them, like and not next to Bryn. So should I put the camera down and go sit next to her or keep filming? And should I be on the doctor in this moment? Or, Bryn just heard this, yeah, harrowing information. Should I be on her to see what her reaction is? But then I just want to be sitting next to her. And that kind of tug and pull was a really big struggle, and we had so many conversations about, yeah, what my role should be. And that's where I started to learn how important it was for Bryn to film and use this art form that we know and love as a way to process it. So then that really helped me, because I think the first many appointments, it was just a real struggle of like, am I just sitting back here as like a cinematographer and producer, and making sure the exposure is right or the lighting is right, or is the mic interrupting the scene a little bit on the doctor's lab coat or not? And I find myself being like, why am I worried about that? I should be paying attention to the information, and then realizing, oh, we're recording it, I could listen to it later, and yeah, it was a lot of difficult conversations, a lot of difficult moments to really own in on what my role was.
Mm. I think again, it's a bit of a metaphor also, like
Yeah.
trying to find, I think most caregivers struggle with trying to figure out when to step in, when to step away, how much to do, how much to allow, how much to, right, when to, when somebody really wants contact and when they want to be left alone, right?
Yeah.
Bryn, were there times where you also struggled, where you were like, "Oh, put the camera down, like I need you now," or did you share that and say that, or or were
Yeah.
you like, "No, capture this, go back to what you're doing"?
Yeah. I think for me, it was maybe the opposite. Like if something was really emotional, I was like, oh my God, film it. Because it just helped me so much. And this is where, but I don't know if I had the words, like going back to language, I don't know if I had the language at the time to even be able to say, like, this is what I need or this is what I don't need. And so it was like I had more language as a filmmaker than I did as a cancer patient. So I'd be like, roll camera, or like focusing on that was my MO because it was what I was most familiar with. And then I think now it's been 6 years, since I had my surgery, and I feel so much more equipped, but that journey is it takes a really long time. Like I think I'm still even figuring out how to communicate. It's like emotional intelligence on top of everything else. Like what do I need? And then how do I communicate that? And I saw a question in the chat as well from another thyroid cancer survivor just about like how do we get the information? And maybe I'll add to that as well, like the care and support that we need if we don't know what questions to even ask. And I would say like the questions, you collect the questions as you go. And it was like, it really was about connecting with other thyroid cancer patients, other survivors, for me, where I started to really develop some of the emotional intelligence, could really feel my feelings. I was talking to people who had been through the same experiences, and I think it made me it's funny, there's a word for caregiver, but what's the word for a patient in a relationship with a caregiver partner? It made me a better partner in being able to like take care of that part of the experience too, and to know how to communicate it. Because I think that is another responsibility for the patient, is to know what we need. But it's really, really hard to know that. And I would say, like, knowing now that it takes so many years that I'm still learning how to do that all the time. And so it creates so much tension, and it's something that, we're not necessarily prepared for at the doctor's office. There's no conversation about how to navigate illness together as
Yeah.
young people. There's the nuances of that just weren't a part of the equation. And so that was something that we had to really figure out for ourselves.
I think having grace, for each other and recognizing, it's hard to recognize when you're in the midst of those things, so it's not quite the right word for it.
Yeah.
But having the grace to be able to say, listen, we're both learning who we are in this and what our roles are and what our roles are in this. And they probably also as evolved through the
Yeah.
course of the journey
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
And on that note, we have a question from someone. How did the experience of treatment change your relationship to each other and even to this day? Um,
Yeah.
Naveen, I'll put you on the hot spot. You want to go first?
Um, I think what Bryn was saying about emotional intelligence, I think it's so difficult to say what you need, and then, in the most difficult situation of being a cancer patient, that's like 100-fold. But I think that kind of growth really has affected the way that I think that we try and talk about things, is like, okay, you really can't guess what the other person wants as much as you'd like to. Like, I would love to have, throughout this whole process and even making this film, to like be able to know what she needed and just do it. um but it was just not the case, and so it was really just being able to somehow create a kind of safer environment where we could have those conversations. And sometimes it's like, in the film, when you're all able to see it, it's like sometimes it's in our living room, or sometimes it's at like a Panera Bread, and that's where you can have some difficult conversations, and finding the moments where you can, yeah, communicate what you need. And that's, yeah, been the through line for me.
Mhm.
Thank you. And Brandon, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, I agree with everything that Naveen just said, and it's also changed. Like earlier this year, I had a medical event unrelated to my thyroid cancer, and just I feel like the way that we navigated that together was so different. Like it was so evolved to, the early days of my thyroid cancer treatment, and I think whenever something I think happens between us in that vein, like if Naveen is going through something, I think I have a deeper understanding of what it means to hold space for someone. I mean, yeah, it's just completely transformed, especially being life partners, thinking about, end of life. Because I think like death and dying and fear of death and dying is such a huge part of being diagnosed with cancer, even if that's not necessarily what's being told, to me as a patient, it was part of it. It's like being faced with your mortality. And I think as partners, understanding like how we feel about that, how is that like present in our relationship not in a way that's morbid or scary necessarily, but in a way that feels like, yeah, just really long term and in it for the sort of long haul. And knowing that we change and continue to change. And I think what's so interesting about watching this film is I look back at it, I'm like, wow, I was so young, I was so lost. We were really searching together, and I do feel more grounded now, but it's good to see that progress, I think I would say.
Yeah. Um, so in this clip also there is a part where you talk about really being afraid of all the little pings and dings that occur in your own body. I think that's something that many people who have chronic illness, cancer, debilitating illnesses, disability can sort of feel like this sense of like their body having turned against them.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if you found ways to reconnect with your body, or if any of your feelings and perspectives have changed about the have changed around just from doing this film about prognosis and treatment, since you made this film.
Mhm. Yeah, there have been, I mean, I think experiencing my body in my body is really helpful. Like exercise is really helpful. Remembering to walk, taking time to like experience my health as well as my disease, I think is really important. It's almost like remembering my abilities as well as my disabilities. I think that's where the exercise component really comes in, and just like feeling embodied, and especially around like other people, even just like funny group classes at the gym, like there's just knowing that like I'm standing up and in community doing this thing too. That helps me build confidence in my body. But then that experience of betrayal is, I think, something that will sort of permeate for the rest of my life. Because yeah, like you said, and like what's in the film, it's every day there's a moment that will remind me, and it'll be this sort of experience, like a headache, for example. And I'll be like, my first thought is going to be like, is this related? And is this the beginning of something really bad all over again? And so I think recognizing that that's happening instead of shelving it, and then remembering that, you know, the evidence suggests that I will at least be fine until tomorrow. And so there's enough time. I think like slowing down with everything, even if it is just like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, like remembering to just slow down in that thought process so that I can like walk myself out of the spiral. I think I'm getting better and better at doing that. It's making me think of this quote that I heard. It's like a German quote, but it's that the sun will rise tomorrow as a hypothesis. And I think like last night I was experiencing like really severe anxiety, and I know it's related to my cancer, but it was just from like another body thing I was having, and just remembering to like compartmentalize those moments and to really like walk myself through it. That's something that I think I have to do at least once every single day.
And to remind yourself all the ways in which that your body heals itself even, right?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
ways in which that your body is strong, right?
Yeah.
And ways in which, and I think those are really
Yeah.
important. Naveen, did you have something you wanted to add? You look like you were gonna.
Oh no, it's like yeah. She said something that I was like I wrote down just remembering my abilities and not just my disabilities. I thought that was like a thing to remember. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
I I'm glad you shared what you wrote down. Um, and what do you think is the personal value of telling your story of trauma while it was happening? And was it therapeutic? And do you recommend storytelling in any form for people who are going through their treatment?
Yes, I do. And in any form that feels natural or comfortable or even like experimental for someone. Because I think it is so much just about your identity. It's about like rewriting your own narrative. And I think for me, being able to do that really, like, it put me back in the driver's seat in a lot of ways. Like, instead of this then being something that's happening to me, this is something that I'm doing. It became much more active, much more of a collaboration with my doctors. It gave me, again, like going back to the time piece, gave me time to like sit and really think creatively, which then would help me, in moments of logistics and just in processing. So yeah, and I've done a couple of workshops with Thika about this, just of this idea of like reclaiming our personal narratives as storytellers. And I've sort of fallen into this since the film's been released and the way it's sort of like engaging with audiences, discovered narrative medicine, which is so cool, and bioethics and this whole world of medicine where I'm like, oh my God, my people, just the importance of patience and storytelling. And that there's, it's like in our industry, there are certain dominant narratives and they're not always true. And they can be really diminishing, I think. And there can be a lot of erasure, whether intentional or not, because not all of us have platforms to tell our stories. And so that's where, in the nooks and crannies and spaces where we can, I think art and storytelling is such a powerful tool. And maybe something that, at some point can be embedded into like doctors' offices as well as just, if there's a resource in community in like our local communities where we have access to some of those support systems. But
Yeah.
what about you, Naveen? Do you think so too?
Yeah, definitely. I think, it made me think about, you know, some of the doctors that we spoke to at the ATA conference, very, very smart people, but they had like their own story with their profession and being interested in cancer because it's this cool thing and the scientific process of it all and being, Bryn being the only patient, probably the whole conference, me being the only caregiver is like so interesting that you're talking about it in this way. Um, and not hearing that perspective from patients, where it's like, how do patients own what their story is and incorporate this
Mhm.
diagnosis and treatment as part of their own empowering story, and and that was what something I think learning from Bryn, even as she was editing the film and seeing the way she saw things and seeing some of the beautiful moments that she brought in, this metaphor with the trees was so interesting that you'll see when you watch the whole film. But that was such an interesting thing that she brought in, and yeah, wanting to hear more from patients. I think
Mhm.
that's so strong.
And I think it really helps too with our doctors, like with that collaborative, with the relationship that we build with our doctors. Because it's, if we as patients are, more versed in our story and in who we are and how we are moving through this experience and navigating this journey, I think it helps. I mean, it helped my doctor certainly, and I think it's a helpful piece of the collaboration for the patient to also come in with some of that information as well, because then that might shape some of the delivery of information. And I think really thinking about that relationship as a collaboration helped me. I just never really knew, that that could be a thing. And my doctors, my PCP and my endocrinologist, I have the same two doctors that I had throughout the making of this film. They let me film for years with them. They did not have all the answers, but they were honest about that. And they were like, we'll figure it out together. you know, and we'll make a decision together. And I think the film became this really helpful way for them to see me as a person too. Not that they wouldn't have done that otherwise, but I think it was just this added element of like, I'm bringing this into this room because this is important to me and this is who I am. And if we're engaging in an art form and taking time to, you know, write or rewrite our own personhood during these experiences, I think it helps. I think we bring that into the appointments with us.
Yeah. And storytelling is in the mind of the storyteller and how they tell it, right? So it doesn't have to be, the end result doesn't have to be a documentary for others to see. It can be your own journaling, it can be your own artwork, it can be your own poetry, it can be personal, doesn't have to be meant to be shared. So I don't want people to walk out of feeling like everybody's got to make a documentary about their cancer journey, because everybody's story can be expressed in whatever way works best for them, whether that be song, poetry, interpretive dance, whatever it is,
Yeah.
it needs to be from that person. I think it's a really great point to think about. This is who I'm bringing into this space, and I need you to work with me on that and who I am.
Mhm.
I want to thank you both so incredibly much. We have gone over. So I want to thank you both so much for being here. Before we wrap up, and I just want to really thank um, Naveen and Bryn for being here today and being so vulnerable also, and sharing clips from your video um, and your own and your thought process with everybody here about your experience, both as a caregiver and as the patient. I just think that those are both so valuable, and to have you both here today has um, just been really wonderful to be a part of.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you
having
for
me.
having us. And well, I guess I could follow up. I don't know if I can drop in the chat, but just a link to our website. And if anyone is curious in tracking the film and seeing if it's playing near you anytime soon, let me see if I
Yeah,
can.
I think that would be wonderful. So
Mm.
thank you all for joining us today for Expression of Illness, a conversation with the filmmakers. We're so grateful to Bryn and Naveen for sharing this powerful documentary and offering such a personal look at how art and storytelling can help us process the challenges of illness. The clips and conversation gave us deeper understanding of how creatively we can transform even the most difficult of experiences. And we hope you leave today feeling inspired to reflect on your own story and connect with others along the way. As a bonus for attending today, you will receive a link to the recording of today's webinar. Please feel free to share that link with anyone you think might benefit. And we will also include a few additional support resources, so be on the lookout for that valuable email next week. Please join us for our next webinar in December, where we'll be sharing inspiring survivor stories alongside comforting holiday recipes, perfect for nourishing both body and spirit during the season. For more resources about cancer of the thyroid, head and neck, focus on the health and mental wellness of newly diagnosed patients, cancer survivors, and their caregivers, please visit the THANC Guide. The THANC Guide provides trusted information, support resources, and inspiration you need as you travel the difficult path of the cancer journey. If today's presentation resonated with you, please be sure to check out our 30 Stories campaign. You can find these insightful and inspiring stories from survivors and caregivers on the THANC Guide, our YouTube channel, and across social media. Once again, for joining today's discussion. We hope you found it inspiring and helpful as you navigate your own journey. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar in December. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone.